So a little bit about me. I'm a Utah native, so I live in Lehi, just up the hill from the Adobe campus, if you're familiar with that. I have exactly one wife and 3 children that keep me really, really busy. And I've spent my entire career at just 3 companies. So I worked at a company called Omniture, if you're familiar with that, that Adobe acquired many years ago. So I've been through that journey from a startup to obviously a massive company where I learned a tremendous amount from a lot of great people. And just a little over a year ago, I joined ServiceNow. And thankfully, some of my colleagues are here today to support me, so thank you. There they are, they're over there. So let me tell you just a little bit about ServiceNow and what they do. So officially, we would say that we are an intelligent platform for digital transformation, but that's not gonna mean anything to all of you. So what it really means is that we produce a bunch of experiences that allow audiences or personas like developers to build really complex workflows that support big enterprises. Or it could be someone like an administrator who has to manage and deploy software to hundreds or thousands of people in their organizations. Or it could be an agent. So imagine that you have a claim that you need to file. Well, there's somebody on the other side of the phone that's picking that up that's actually working to manage it in experiences that look like this. And we design all of those type of experiences and even more. And on the other side are what we call today sort of portals or service experiences, which I'll talk about today. So these are what you as a consumer or an employee would actually use. So imagine that you work for Nike or Starbucks, and you're an employee and you need to get help of some sort. Well, you would go to one of these portals to be able to order a new laptop or figure out your benefits or have a question about payroll. Or if you're a customer of like Starbucks, you might go here when you need support. Think about, again, Travelers as an insurance company might be someone who would provide services. Or if you're like me, it's Disney Plus. My kids watch it all day long, and if there's a problem with my Disney Plus account, I would go to their website, and ServiceNow powers all those experiences. So think about it as portal and mobile and sort of those omni-channel experiences that we as consumers all experience. And at ServiceNow, I lead a group called Design Innovation. And that includes the visual designers who sort of own the brand strategy and the look and feel, content designers who design with words. Hopefully we've got some content designers in the audience here. But those who design with words and think in terms of content strategy and information architecture. I've got a team of design engineers, and they really help us to bridge between what designers are sort of making up in a silo and what engineering can actually build, and they really work on some great prototypes to sort of connect the dots there. And then finally, communication design. And at ServiceNow, I'm in sort of a unique position where my team owns all the keynotes and demos and storytelling for our entire product executive suite. And we work on lots of things like this, so I was able to lean on my team heavily for this presentation. So I want to tell you about a case study of a project that I took on really quickly. I mentioned I have sort of the horizontal or the shared design practices at ServiceNow, which puts me in a unique position where I don't necessarily have a fealty to a particular business unit or product line. I work and partner with UX teams and product teams and engineering teams across the board. So we had an interesting sort of moment or presentation opportunity about a year ago. I had been about 6 months. It was maybe the first real thing that I'd done at ServiceNow, where we went and presented to some of our most senior product executives. And we had outlined this vision, we produced this whole video around it, to put forward a point of view of how we would unify all of our sort of disparate developer experiences across the board. And we thought through things like how does the brand come to life in the navigation? While we had just launched this really fantastic new sort of platform and product overhaul, our marketing team had just launched a new brand, and those things were a little bit out of sync. So in these experiences, we thought through, well, how does the ServiceNow brand come to life? What's the right color palette? All the way down to, in those experiences you just saw, like putting the canvas front and center. As someone who spent most of their career at Adobe, it's in my DNA that the work that is being done by the people that use all of our products should be front and center in front of them. So we put this presentation together, but the feedback was, well, yeah, you should just do that. Like, it looks good, but like, why aren't you doing that anyways? Get to work. And afterwards, our president leaned over at some point to our head of design, who's my manager, and said, that's all great, but what I really want to know is, what is your point of view on end user experiences? What is your vision for that? While we have many teams who focus on particular business units or verticals or other types of offerings, There is no single team at ServiceNow sort of historically that thought specifically about all of these end user experiences. Yes, that's the front door to what we do, but we didn't have a sort of a unified vision where we're gonna go with those things. So I would also love to tell you that when I get a question like this, that it came with a list of artifacts and assets that need to be produced in any kind of a brief, but as many of you probably experienced, we didn't get a lot of that. We had to really figure out, and part of why I think the first skill you have to learn is, how do I demystify this really obscure ask? They're asking for a reason. It's probably incredibly important, but we get to go do the hard work to figure out sort of what that's gonna mean for us. So one of the things we also realized quickly is we needed a really clear strategy. We needed to understand as an experience organization, how are we gonna approach solving these types of problems? And the good news is we have a strategy that we believe in, that great user experiences drive productivity. So whether you're a consumer, again, using an experience that we provide for our customers, we of course are a B2B company, or you're an employee, if we're not designing experiences that boost their productivity and help them to get their job done or the task done quickly, we've not done our jobs. So a couple just really quick examples of how we have approached these in the past, and I wish we had had something even as beautifully convoluted as this. But imagine you're a new hire. The process that they go through and the tools and the different steps and software that's required to orchestrate this between the employee that's just trying to get started, which I experienced for the first time in a long time last year, and the hiring manager who just needs that person like getting, real in life and getting to work. That's really complicated typically. But we've historically had some success when we really take our platform-centric workflow approach to streamlining how the data and the workflows and all of those people sort of interact with one another. And we end up with workflows that look as beautiful as this. And we know that when we've done that type of an approach historically, these customers have incredible results. So whether it's Pepsi that we've done some work with recently, or an employee portal that we've designed in partnership with Nike, these customers have these incredible returns on their productivity and their business performance when we've approached things with a really clear strategy. So I now want to tell you about my journey over the last year or so that I've been at ServiceNow when it came to herding cats. And I say that with love, and the sleepy one in the left corner was me. So first thing we did, of course, is we got, like any effective team would, 25 people together on a hybrid call, our first time sort of back in the office, and we all came together trying to figure out what on earth was asked of the team. We're learning how to meet again as a hybrid team and like what are the right inclusive practices. That was challenging. And a lot of people were really excited to contribute and tell us how they tried to tackle this problem before. But the real story became after the meeting and behind the scenes when I was approached by multiple people who said, oh my gosh, I understand what it is that you're going to tackle, and I'm so glad it's you and that it's not me, which was an incredibly heartening thing for me to hear as a relatively new design leader in the company who was given this really sort of amorphous task. But we realized really quickly we had to be very decisive. Who's in charge? Who's gonna come together to do this? So after we got the broad group together, and again, they were happy to share lots of links to SharePoint sites that nobody had looked at in 3 years, and a bunch of brilliant work, though it had sort of been lost in the annals of our history. We thought, well, let's get a new team together. Let's make sure that we pull together people who have expertise, maybe as UX experts who understood those particular platforms or personas, research partners who had also looked in this problem, again, many times before, but then mix in some new blood into the team as well. So I pulled some people from my innovation lab, and importantly, my head of content design, because we realized how critical it was to think about content in, again, I'm a massive fan of content design as a discipline that I think needs more focus. But we needed to think about content first, and how do we put content at the heart of all of these service experiences. So we wanted to make sure that the team was diverse in both skill set and also experience and background, that we had new people and people who had some deep expertise. But we knew that in doing this, since it had been tried a couple times before, that we needed to think about a new approach and a new way of solving this problem. Now, before I get into the rigorous discipline of what we did, I love this meme. I can't take credit for it. I wish it had been my idea. But I would be lying if I said we didn't have 1 or 2 people who jumped into high fidelity interactive prototypes they started selling around before we were even clear on what the problem was that we were trying to solve. And as they presented, it was another great reminder to me of how critical it is to think about all of the rest of these steps. The research phase, the customer validation phase, working with stakeholders, understanding what the business needs, all of those things is required. So we kindly and lovingly pulled some of those white Broncos back in and we got to work with the real work. So I mentioned that this had been tackled before in a couple ways previously, and there were so many artifacts that were available for us to go and to look at. But so many people had been working on these things sort of asynchronously in different silos that we didn't have a unified strategy and point of view. So like any person with a visual design background, I spent multiple Sunday mornings reading through tomes and tomes and tomes of user feedback. 8 pages of why our buyers are struggling with a particular product line. A readout of how someone had tried to approach the problem previously. And we realized that there is incredible information that's available if you do the hard work. And we had to eventually just distill all of that down, and we spent another couple weeks and a couple early Sunday mornings with our favorite caffeinated beverage, rewriting a new strategic outline to make sure that everybody got on the same page around where we were going to go. So putting in the hard work is a thing. Again, you have to think strategically despite whatever might be on your business card. And once we had the research underway, we were able to start to go to work. We started to put together storyboards and wireframes and taking those sort of early YOLO concepts and translated them into a sensible flow. But given the nature of these experiences, really required us to understand how employees and consumers were thinking, where many people in ServiceNow are very comfortable with how agents and sort of middle and back office personas work. We actually found that instead of a wireframe, which was rarely controversial as we sort of walk people through these, writing these out in a narrative format, and we heard early on around sort of emotional narratives, that became the artifact that really worked for us. When we were able to say, here's a customer of Starbucks, they're trying to get service of some sort, or here's an employee who's trying to put together a new program and they don't know who to, in their organization they need to talk to. When we wrote those out into stories, suddenly they started to click with teams. And suddenly we were having more sort of effective conversations. So we found, again, before you jump into design and start pushing pixels, and I've got a fine arts background, so this is a learned behavior for me over many, many years. We learned that writing is designing. If you start by thinking about story and narrative and the value of content, you can move some really, really large mountains in the work that you're doing. So once we got through the narratives and we started to put together some concepts, which I will share at the end, sort of an end-to-end sort of high fidelity story of where we landed, we started to shop these around. And so I share these particular cat personas with all the love in my heart, but we ran into 4 very particular types of groups. The first are what we call the HEP cats. And these are people who are deep experts in your business. They're gonna challenge you. You might find them difficult to work with. And if they're ego-driven, that's really challenging. You just have to make them feel heard. But what I found is when you can find people in your organization who are mission-driven, because they understand the customer and they understand what it is you're trying to solve, those are the people you're gonna learn the most from. We have, again, said lovingly, the Frady cats. Sorry, hang on. The Frady cats. So these are, again, many people who had tried this before, but they had run into roadblocks on their own. And so they were hesitant to want to dive in because they'd sort of seen this story before. And we wanted to give them the confidence that we are there as partners and we value their input and we want them to come to the table with us. Of course, there's plenty of cool cats. And these are great peers that I found who got the vision early and they knew that they needed to partner with us. And the challenge here was figuring out how do you align the timing and the motivations. We heard about KPIs and OKRs, whatever you use in your organization. That was a matter of just getting our stars to align. But once we did that and those teams dove in, the work accelerated and took off in new directions we could never have gotten to on our own. And then finally is the fat cats, right? These are the business folks. And it is critical to understand how to have conversations with this group. They're not interested in having in-depth discussions around color theory or talk about heuristics, but they want to understand and to know that you understand your business and you understand your roadmaps and that you understand how these products actually get sold to market and how the thing that you were pitched them on is going to be packaged and sold. And if that doesn't land, you're gonna be in trouble. So with that persona in mind, I want to show you the pitch that I actually went into once we got this work together. So we finally, after months of pulling these teams together, had an opportunity for me to finally sit down with this fully baked presentation. We'd spent months, I don't want to say how many months it was, many months, right? We heard 6 months, that's probably pretty standard for any sort of big effort. And I had a chance to sit down with our president of the company and present this work. And before I was able to jump in and show him this gorgeous, high fidelity, stunning stuff I'll share in a moment, he paused me and said, Steve, I want you to know that before you get started, I'm gonna judge the quality of this presentation on whether or not you convince me that there's a new opportunity in a market for us. And in that moment, of course, my life flashed before my eyes because I was not prepared to have that conversation at all. And I paused for what felt like an eternity, hopefully it was just a couple of milliseconds, as I thought through, well, I can talk to some of this stuff, right? I spent years in marketing. I'm comfortable talking about funnels and lead flow and scoring and routing and market opportunities, but I'm not comfortable in this environment in a company where I'm 6 months in, talking about what we can do. So in that moment, I thought about everything I could possibly say, and I just said, dude, I don't know. I didn't say dude, but I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But thank you for that feedback, and next time we come back, we will have thought through some of those particular angles. So it was in this moment I realized, which I knew this, but I had to learn this lesson the hard way, and I hope everyone can learn from here, that you have to think in those moments as an owner, like you're the GM of the product, and that you're gonna think through it top to bottom. Steve Jobs was once famously quoted as saying, at the VP level, you don't get to make excuses. And I actually think we should all embrace that, regardless of sort of where you sit in your organizations. But if you're there and you're presenting, you need to have a command of what you're saying and understand why you're doing it. So let me now jump in here and show you what the actual presentation looked like. So again, to set the stage, we had this beautiful, right, high production thing together, right? We got this beautiful new Rivian truck. And we imagined, what if we could help travelers solve insurance claims as part of a partnership with Rivian? So as we jumped into this, of course, we thought ready to go. Well, we know the user problems. They find our tools hard to use. We know the buyer problems. They want it to go from 7 clicks to 2 or whatever. So here's our story. So imagine that you're James and you're driving home one night in your beautiful new Rivian truck and you get rear-ended at a stop sign. It's a minor accident, so nobody's hurt. So imagine if the Rivian, using all of its great telemetry, could immediately start to talk to James and say, hey, are you okay? Do you want to go check with the other driver? And once you do that, we can actually contact travelers for you and get your claims started. And of course, if any of you have ever been in a fender bender, these are nightmarish experiences. Something happens, you stumble out of your car, you try to take photos, you exchange information. It's really, really problematic. So we thought, well, we think we can help the agents and travelers if we can get Rivian to share all that data to start to pre-populate all of those very complex and convoluted claims forms. So we got to this stage and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is right. Like, this work is beautiful. We were super excited. And he pauses me again and says, so hang on. So what you're telling me is that before I can go and talk to people at Travelers, and by the way, I personally am friends with the chief information officer and the chief digital officer at Travelers. And you're telling me that before ServiceNow can help them, which is your job, I have to have them go and strike up a really complicated partnership agreement with a nascent EV company that's struggling to sell their cars. Like, that doesn't work. You've lost me. Come back next week and try again. So that was the second moment that I had where my life flashed before my eyes twice in one particular meeting where I realized it's critical that when you are presenting, again, whether you're in a product role or a design role, I know many of you end up probably spanning those roles and being in meetings where you present both those thoughts. If you can't articulate how your design or your product is going to actually drive tangible business value, you failed, which I had in that moment. So flash forward a week. We come back, attempt number 2. And of course, as we set that up, I'm like, thank you so much for that feedback last week. We've thought through those things, right? And now suddenly the presentation was chock full of in-depth thoughts around, total addressable markets and who are we talking to internally and how we're gonna make sure that we really understand not only end user problems, which is where we thought we were starting, or buyer problems, which is where our research had been, but also having anecdotes from actual customers so that we could speak to the executive need, right? In this case, we're selling potentially millions of dollars of software. If you can't talk to all 3 of those audiences fluently, you're gonna be in trouble. So we said, we're here now to show you that our business, our ideas can actually drive value. So let's jump back into that story again. No offense to Corolla drivers, but we came back with a story that basically said, instead of a fancy truck that most people can't afford, let's go more mass market. how would we help Toyota and families who have multiple cars to be able to have the same type of great claims experiences in partnership with travelers? And as I mentioned, we expanded it. I won't read all these, but we added the business perspective to make sure that if we're talking to the chief digital officer of travelers, we can explain, we know exactly what your organization is struggling with, and we're gonna show you now an experience concept that's gonna help you to solve for all of those different personas that you have. So we'll jump back into the story again. So again, we're back to it. It's James, it's a rainy night. He comes up to a stoplight and he gets rear-ended again. But this time, instead of Rivian and this complicated, convoluted partnership that apparently I thought was a good idea, this is a horizontal technology-driven thing through Apple CarPlay, which is of course very prevalent in most automobiles. And then the rest of the experience continues, right? Apple CarPlay and telemetry data could partner with travelers and share those things, and the same thing happens. So now it's Siri, right? In your car, you don't care who's talking to you, but Siri is now telling you, hey, we saw you were in a fender bender, right? We have the data. Are you okay? Have you talked to the person? Let's move forward. So having overcome that very strong business strategy thing that I had overlooked, we were able to finally sort of bridge into a more realistic scenario. So flash forward to the next day. James is sitting on his couch in his living room, and he gets a notification where he's able to instantly get an update on his claim, because again, that had all been automatically started for him. So he jumps in, right? And right on the top of the application, Travelers owns the application. ServiceNow is providing a playbook that's sort of embedded in it. It's a very complex story that we're trying to solve here. The claim gets started. He's able to jump into it, right? We've already got the claim initiated, move on to the next step. So both the end user has all of the data that they would have had to relay to someone on the phone, and the agent who would have had to listen on the other side of the phone. Now the journey and the pain between those two audiences gets shorter and shorter. And they're able to figure out, based on this sharing of pre-populated data, well, what happened, what was damaged on your car. They could use multiple technologies to actually walk around their Corolla, and based on data, they could figure out exactly what it was that was damaged. Then the person, who is us, which is why I think these end user experiences are so fascinating, because we all, as we went through this, we're putting ourselves into this. I can't tell you how many of us then talked about well, when I was in an accident, this is what happened. Or when I was in an accident, I treated it differently. So we had so much to draw on because we are this persona in this case. And they were able to go through it and get a rental car and find a repair shop and even sign it really, really quickly. And in theory, James in this case, the user, could do this entire thing sitting on his couch the morning afterwards. And then also get connected, of course, to an agent to make sure that as the claims and the adjustment sort of, I don't know if you're all insurance specialists. I am not, I was not then, nor am I now, but we were able to work through this and many other sort of similar experiences to be able to think in the terms of how do we solve tangible business problems for multiple users and understand the voice of the customer and the role that design plays in solving these things. And again, as we went through this, we were able to go from what is the problem to what is the outcome that we're gonna drive for all three of those audiences. And you heard quite a bit about outcomes today too, which I've really enjoyed. And that was just one example, right? We're thinking about the insurance agency or the insurance industry, the manufacturing industry. Maybe it's somebody with a smart home and they're using, Samsung's connected device. How do they get a service experience? What's the role that ServiceNow plays in, streamlining and creating more delightful experiences? Or I mentioned, right, a Nike employee portal, and we're partnering with them to solve these types of things. So there are almost endless opportunities to think about service experiences differently. But we had to learn so many lessons in order to sort of bring these things to life. So just to recap those quickly, the first is understanding the ask. You're going to get asked stuff every day that you don't understand. That's okay. I've understood almost nothing in my first year at ServiceNow, so I'm figuring out how to sort of parse these things and come up with a clear understanding. You have to have a strategy, and hopefully in your organization, sort of what tools are available to you. You have to make decisions about who's in charge. Collaboration always leads to better products, but you still need to know who is on the hook for the work. Sometimes you have to try new approaches. If you did a thing that didn't work before, sometimes you have to try again. And we're making some great progress now that for many reasons outside of me was not possible a couple years ago. You've got to be willing to put in the hard work too. So again, if you're in a product or a design role, be comfortable talking in terms of research and insights and personas and meeting with real customers. You have to understand the motivations of all the people that you work with. Again, I shared those sort of 4 cat personas lovingly, but those are all real people that I got to know who helped to educate me and make this process and this product that we're designing better. Writing is designing, which I talked about. Thinking like an owner and really owning the thing that's being asked of you is a skill that everybody needs, regardless of sort of where you're starting. And making sure that when you are articulating and telling those stories back to whoever's asked you to do it, that you're speaking in terms that they understand are gonna drive value for your company. So thank you so much for that. I've really enjoyed the chance to work on this project and to be here today, so thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You mentioned putting in the work to discover patterns in research.
Yeah.
What have you found are the highest value activities when trying to pull on those threads?
Yeah, so in this particular case, we had a lot of really, really great research, but what we realized as we were going through some of these presentations, the research was for not the persona that we were the most concerned about in that moment. So I think understanding who in particular you need to understand. So in this case, what would have been incredibly helpful is if before I got to the stage where I was flubbing some of what I was presenting, if I had had a chance to talk to our account team and to our customers at Travelers directly, the story that I would have been able to tell in that moment where I was asked a story and I didn't have an answer for it, we eventually did that afterwards. So while we had a lot of great written research, it was very tactical. And what we were looking for is like, no, I need a real customer anecdote from a title and a name at a company that we would know. And once we got that 3 weeks later, we came back and it was a home run because we knew exactly who they were and we could speak in real tangible terms. So I think the question is understanding what level are you being asked to present to? Is it about going from 7 clicks to 2? We had great data around that. Is it, have you talked to the person at the company who's gonna buy the software and do you think they're gonna believe you? Well, I wasn't prepared to do that. So I think it's understanding, again, all of that research is valid, but there may be multiple altitudes and you have to sort of understand what you're being asked to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of companies, whether we refer to them as innovative products or big bets or market opportunities, you've worked at fairly large organizations. If you were to try to help maybe a smaller organization under 1,000 employees, to give an example, how would you go about trying to integrate some of this innovative thinking alongside of, hey, I just need to hit product market fit?
So if I were to be, and the last leg of my career journey, I want to go back into a startup. That's what I told myself. I came from there when it was Omniture, and I now am full of all of this experience that I didn't have there. I knew nothing at that time, and I wish I could go back and sort of repeat that. So if I was at a 1,000-person company again, which is about where I ended at Omniture, the opportunity at that size to really, really understand your customers is tremendous. So, right, ServiceNow is big. Adobe is so big and monolithic, it's so varied that it was always really hard to actually get to know real customers. And coming from a marketing background too, I thought about data and customers in very sort of aggregate terms. I managed analytics teams and I worked on big brand campaigns and all sorts of other random stuff. But in that case, it was never real people. It was always a funnel and it was an aggregation of a persona or a market or something. But in a product organization, if you can't speak to an actual human being about the problem, you're in trouble. So if I was in a small company, I would spend all day long with your customers. And I think we heard some of those great stories, that great research project we heard about from Chatbooks. That's the kind of work I would do all day long. So, and I would get all the designers and product people really, really comfortable with the voice of the customer in every single decision that we make.
Give Steve another round of applause.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.